Hey guys, welcome to Module 4. So we are at the halfway point, or just about. And so I just wanted to touch on some key takeaways from last week, because last week you did your Milestone 1 assignment. And so basically your Milestone 1 assignment was a culmination of our discussions on judicial systems. So over the last couple of weeks, you've learned about the hierarchical structure for federal and state courts. You learned about the roles associated with each of those levels. For example, you researched the differences in and the primary roles of the U.S. District Court, U.S. Circuit Courts of Appeals, and United States Supreme Court. And you also did the same with state courts in your discussion board assignment, where you described the jurisdiction of the different tiers in the state courts. So that would be their primary role and responsibility. So trial courts of limited jurisdiction, for example, their primary role is to resolve minor disputes or minor cases, infractions and misdemeanors. And the reality of it is those are the bulk of the criminal justice system. Most people get into trouble are for infractions like a speeding ticket or misdemeanors, maybe a DUI or vandalism or something along those lines. Okay, and then there are the trial courts of general jurisdiction and intermediate appellate courts, and then of course state courts of last resort. So each of those has a significant role to play in that unique judicial system. All right, so that's what we learned first of all. So we talked about the hierarchical structure and the roles of each of those tiers within those structures. Um, then we learned about the difference between federal and state court systems. All right, so we learned, for example, that the type of cases, caseload, uh, judicial appointment, in other words, how do judges reach the bench, vary amongst federal and state courts. All right. We also learned that the primary difference between federal and state courts is going to lie with jurisdiction. In other words, the authority of a court to hear a particular type of case. Right? So that's one of the primary differences between federal and state courts. And then we can follow that with things such as types of cases, caseload, even the level of public and media scrutiny. Right? So that was part of our discussions in a previous assignment. So those are some of the important distinctions and differences between federal and state courts. And so why are these levels important? In other words, why do we have a dual court system? Now, some of it can go back to the historical basis of our founding fathers not wanting an overreaching and powerful federal judicial system. So they limited the ability of federal courts by limiting their jurisdiction. All right, because remember back then we still had a faction that believed that states should have the power, not the federal government. Some believe that federal government should have the power, not the states. So this was sort of a give and take in how they resolve that issue. All right, so states still have a unique amount of authority in terms of the laws that they establish, punishments that they establish for these crimes, and so forth. All right. Um, so getting back again to why these are important, why we have federal and state court system, a lot of it also has to do with the fact that there are, quite frankly, certain offenses and certain legal matters that cannot be handled at the state level. For example, if you have a major corporation, let's say Ford, and Ford develops a car and that car has a problem, in other words, a defect that has caused harm to people throughout the United States. All right. Um, those type of lawsuits can be handled at the federal level because we're talking about litigants in all states, all right, multiple states, which means it would be very ridiculous for for the attorney to have to go to each state and try their case, 40 times or 50 times or whatever the case is. So federal court can have jurisdiction on those type of cases because they involve residents from throughout the United States. Okay, a single company, but several litigants that are spread out throughout the United States. So that would be a proper venue for federal courts. But there are still things that need to be handled at the state court level or the local level. And I gave you an example of a college town. Uh, that they might need to have more enforcement on certain types of offenses because they're a college town, as a means to control maybe college students' behavior within the community. Right. So each of those levels is important. But hopefully you can see that why we have those levels, right? They're just, quite honestly, even when you look at crimes such as interstate crimes, those are often, again, handled by the federal government, the FBI, because they involve multiple states, multiple jurisdictions, crossing one state line into another state to commit an offense with an ongoing, maybe criminal enterprise such as gang activity or drug trafficking or those kind of issues. And it's more responsible to have that at one location at the federal level than involving multiple states. All right, so we talked about that. Subject matter jurisdiction, again, is the authority of a court to hear a particular type of case. And so last week in your discussion assignment, you researched courts of special jurisdiction. And I like to also refer to those as subject matter courts because they are. In other words, juvenile court only has the authority to hear juvenile cases. Immigration courts only have the authority to hear immigration cases. All right. And so to me, those are part of that subject matter jurisdiction. And so again, learning about those kind of courts and why they're important. And oftentimes these courts are important because they have the time and the resources. For example, juvenile cases are a different type of case. We try not to make them as adversarial as adults. The focus is on rehabilitation. So it might involved a considerable amount of resources to try to figure out what's wrong with this kid and maybe get him back on the path to being a good citizen. Okay. Again, immigration courts is another court that needs to have time and resources, although right now they're backlogged. There's too many cases to process. But then again, that's their specialty. That's the specialized courts. A unique set of circumstances, resources that have to be applied, an array of things that have to take place. So that's the focus of the subject matter jurisdiction. And then the milestone one assignment closed out by having you look at jurisdiction and venue. We've talked about jurisdiction and venue for some time now. Jurisdiction is the authority to hear a case, and venue is the proper location in which a case is to be heard. So now you're applying jurisdiction and venue to our bank robbery scenario, which, if you recall in previous short module lectures and our announcements, we decided that bank robbery for purposes of our scenario will be a federal crime because it is a federal crime. And so we're going to have it as a federal crime. It occurs in the District of Columbia, which is sort of unique because the District of Columbia is not a state. But the District of Columbia does have a court system, but that court system primarily deals with more of the everyday things that we think of when we view what state courts would handle. Citations, fights, drunk in public, drunk driving, burglaries, things like that. Okay, so we looked at the whole idea of jurisdiction and venue, and again, bank robbery is a federal crime, so now we have federal courts involved. The question then becomes, what is the federal court within the District of Columbia that should handle this case? And then I gave you the answer to that in our announcements and short module lecture. Okay, so that is where we've been. So we've talked about judicial systems. This week we're shifting to judicial administration. And judicial administration is we're going to be talking about how the courts actually operate. So first we're going to talk about the key employee roles within the court system that help keep the court moving in an efficient and effective manner. And so your first assignment in Module 4 for your short paper assignment is you're going to be looking at court employee roles. So you're going to select one of a handful of court employee roles that are part of the assignment guidelines. So please make sure you view the assignment guidelines and you select one of those roles. And then you're going to look at the role. What exactly does this person do within the courthouse? And then how does that position promote judicial efficiency, right? And so, for example, let's say you're going to research the bailiff, and you can talk about what the bailiff does in terms of their day-to-day duties and responsibilities. And obviously, maybe one of those duties and responsibilities is to ensure that in-custody inmates are at the courthouse. Okay, so let's say that's one of their duties and responsibilities. So one of their tasks would be to go and make sure that if Jim Doyle is supposed to be in court today for an arraignment, that I am in fact in a holding cell waiting to be brought into court so I can be properly arraigned. All right? Because if Jim Doyle is not there, then the bailiff needs to let the court know, or the court clerk know, that I'm not there. And so steps need to be taken to have me brought to court, because we don't want to delay certain legal proceedings, because that complicates issues not only legally but also for the court. Okay, so I'm going to have to somehow get myself to court. The sheriff's going to have to bring me to the courthouse where I can be properly arraigned, maybe later in the day, or if the jail is adjacent to the court, it shouldn't be much of a task for me to be brought over. So, for example, that's sort of what we're looking for in terms of, you know, the duties and responsibilities of these particular court people, and then how do they promote judicial efficiency. All right. So the short module lecture, I talk about that as well. All right. So that's what we're doing this week. So remember, your short paper requires at least 3 sources, APA style. All right. And I think that's it. So I'll be taking a look at your milestone 1 assignments. This is this is the beginning of your final project. So the final project is milestone 1, milestone 2, and then there are about 5 to 7, I don't recall the exact number, other critical elements which are not part of milestone 1 and milestone 2 that will be part of your final project. Now I'll explain those as we get into week 7 and then week 8. Okay. That having been said, that's it. I hope you guys have a great weekend. If you have any questions or any concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, guys, thank you so much. I will talk to you later. Bye.